Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. This is in response to episode 21, calling it In Response to a Pursuit of a Military Career. And in this episode, I have my old buddy from basic training that I haven't seen or talked to in a lifetime and a half. His name's Jesse Bond, and we went to basic training together in 2001. He shares his stories about being in the military, going through basic training. He does a much better job of remembering and retelling what that was like than I am capable of, because for some reason my brain has shut out that part of my life to a large extent. I don't know why, but maybe it's just because I didn't like it very much. At any rate, I'm still trying to figure out, as I'm sure you'll discover, how to conduct an interview. Although this is not exactly an interview show, I would prefer to just have conversations with guests. I do find myself falling into a kind of interview pattern, and I'm not sure if I want to just try better to improve my interviewing abilities, or if I want to make a better effort to stay away from making these conversations seem like an interview. I'll just keep practicing, and I'll keep putting out these episodes as I make them, despite how unsuccessful I think they may be, or how disappointed I may be with the outcome, because if I wait until I am perfectly satisfied with one to release it, I will never release one. So I'm just going to keep putting them out as I practice and hopefully get better. And I hope you can at least get something good out of it. This episode is meant to speak to especially 17-year-olds, but really anyone who's considering a career in the military. And I don't know that there's a whole lot that we can say that might help either give advice or, either persuade or dissuade people from joining the military. But I hope there's something in this conversation that can be of use to anyone considering that kind of career. And so, I hope you enjoy this. Okay, this is In Response to, and I'm here with my friend Jesse Bond. We have not seen each other in 16 years, and we have not spoken to each other until very recently in 16 years. But we were in basic training together in AIT, which is the specialized school portion of basic training, basically the part that follows the general education basic training. And for us, we were military police officers, so we had AIT together in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, where all MPs get trained. And I want to welcome Jesse to the podcast. Thanks a lot for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
And I think we're going to, as I said in the intro, I'm just going to use this episode as a way to speak to, I guess, primarily teenagers, people that are considering joining the military and perhaps the Army especially. And the way to do that, I think, is to just talk about what it was like for us to be in that field. And I want to ask Jesse what was it like for you? You showed up at basic training at 18, I assume, just like most of us?
Yeah, I was 18.
Yeah, and why don't you run through what it was like, the first day, the first moment you realized, oh no, I'm in a different world now. What was that like?
Well, maybe I can kind of segue to why I went into the Army. Kind of gives a little background. Both my parents were both in the Army. So growing up, I moved around a lot, was in the Army family, going place to place. And that was what I wanted to do, was follow in my parents' footsteps. So I think I had a better idea of what the Army was going to be going into basic training, especially. And growing up, I watched my fair share of TV, especially History Channel and Discovery Channel. So I had a really good idea of what was to be expected. But of course, you don't know what to expect exactly. Going into, I went to MEPS at Des Moines, Iowa, And the
Will you
next day,
explain what MEPS is for everybody, please?
MEPS, there's different MEPS located all over the United States, and it doesn't matter if you're Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps. You have to go there. You get your like physicals done, and it's like the finalization of your contract. And once you pass all the physicals, your analysis, the drug test, then you get sworn in, and then you're off to whatever basic training location. So for me, that was in Des Moines, Iowa, and I went through everything, sworn in, and then hopped on a plane to, I believe it was St. Louis, Missouri, and then they bussed us from St. Louis to Fort Leonard Wood. If my memory serves correct, I think we flew into St. Louis. And then once you arrived at Fort Leonard Wood, then the fun began. We headed to, I believe it was called replacement or the reception, and spent the night there. And then the next day is when everything started, from getting your haircuts to immunizations and getting issued your uniforms, and then actually starting the process of becoming a soldier.
And there wasn't very good champagne at this reception, if I remember.
No.
Right?
No.
The hors d'oeuvres were shit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You remember the Smart Book?
Smart book. No, I have to say, basically everything you just said seemed like I was hearing it for the first time. Even though I lived through it, I feel like I don't remember anything about being in the military almost, because I couldn't have even told you about any of that if you had just asked me 5 minutes ago.
That's funny. Well, the Smart Book is what they gave everybody or issued to them, and it was a small little hand-sized booklet, and it was everything you needed to know to be a soldier, from rank structure to the courtesies and everything like that. So at the reception, everything is hurry up and wait. So you're in line, big long lines, and when you're in line and you're in your uniform, you're at the parade rest and you're reading Smart Book. And when the cadre would go by, if you were talking or if you weren't at parade rest looking at your Smart Book, then they would go and talk to you. Because at this point, there's no drill sergeants yet. In the reception, it's just NCOs, non-commissioned officers, so sergeants and above. And they were there to corral you, get you to your different stations. And then once you finish that reception and you finish going through your different stations, then finally you get bussed over to where you would spend the 9 weeks of basic training and 8 weeks or so of the MP school.
Yeah. When the good times roll.
Exactly.
All right, so now we're in basic training, and like you said, you had some fairly developed idea of what to expect, although not the same as actually being there. So that's way different than my experience. I was the kind of fool who was just presented an opportunity to do something because I knew I wasn't going to get into college because I sucked in high school. I had no prospects whatsoever, so I just, recruiters came to my house and I said, oh, okay, I'll try that. I don't know anything about it, but I'll try that. Sounds like a pretty stupid way to commit 5 years of your life, but that's what happened with me. But now, okay, we're in basic training, and from what I recall, you were a physical freak at that age. So I take it you relished the physical challenges they presented to us in basic. I think a lot of people probably fear that to some degree. And although I was an athlete, but not anywhere muscular at all, but I like that kind of stuff, the running and the push-ups and all that physical challenge. Mm-hmm. You want to talk about, I don't know, what do you think about that portion of what basic training is about? The physical.
So every morning, or let's back it up, every night, there's a roster called Fire Guard. So everybody's sleeping, and there's at least 2 people at each bay, and these 2 people, it's called Fire Guard. And there's a desk set up, and there's a big open bay, and there's one person at the desk and then the other person is cleaning. It's either they're cleaning the toilets, they're sweeping, they're mopping the floors, or they're using a buffer to buff the floor. And I believe it's an hour shift or 2 hour shift, and there's a roster. And then when your shift is about over, then you have to go wake up the next shift. So that's a constant thing. And then you have to wake up. But I remember I would wake up before you're supposed to wake up. So they would give you time to wake up, and I would wake up before that and get ready, whether you're wearing your PT uniform or the BDUs. But on the days that we had to go to PT formation, which I believe was every day, you would get on your PTs and you would be outside in the formation, ready to go. So you don't want to be late because there's a schedule that they have to keep to. It's all day and it's 7 days a week. So they want to make sure that everybody's in line, and they want to prevent people from straying from the schedule. And in the morning, when we went, it was in the end of June, early July. So there was no issues with the weather being cold. So it was warm, to say the least. It was in Missouri, and usually every day you would do some running and then some calisthenics.
All right, you talked about us being in basic training in June and July, and this was the year 2001. So I guess for everybody, that year really just means one thing at this point. And so
Right.
I remember, this is probably the thing I remember most about being in basic training, is the day that they put us all in a room together in the barracks and brought a TV out. I don't know they ever brought a TV out other than this day, and showed us video of, or live news coverage of what turned out to be the 9/11 attacks. And I remember not being totally convinced that it was real. Like, I thought maybe this is something they show everyone who goes through basic training to scare them or to get them to think like this could happen any time. We have to be ready. Who knows? But it turned out to be real, sadly. And they threatened to graduate us early and ship us to New York to guard who knows what. But do you have anything you want to say about what that was like being in basic training for 9/11?
I remember we were in unarmed self-defense class, and then from there they brought us back to the barracks, and the females had their own section of the barracks on the bottom floor. Took us all into the female floor, their open bay, and that's when they wheeled out that big TV like they had in middle school and high school. And from what I remember, it was the news footage that somebody had recorded, and that's what they showed us. And after they showed us the footage, I think a bunch of people had questions, and then they released a number of people who had relatives in New York City, so they could call. They had to go to the payphones, which were located outside a distance from the barracks, and they can call and make sure that any of their loved ones were not injured or missing in the carnage that followed the attacks.
The way I talk about my time in the military now, when people ask me whether they're asking me about do I regret it or would I do it again, or do I advise a 17-year-old to do it, or something like that, I always tell them when I signed up, and this was I signed up for the delayed entry program, so I think I was only 16, and then I waited until I was 18 before I left, but I had already signed up long before that. But at that time, in 99 or 2000, whatever it was, the world seemed like the safest place all around. Like the United States had no threats, seemingly. It was going to the military was nothing more than a job, as far as I could tell. And for me, it was a way of trying to play baseball, although that did not work out, as I talked about in a different episode. But after 9/11, now I have to tell people I would not. Like, the world has changed, so I try to tell people I wouldn't do it. I guess the further away we get from 9/11, the less immediate that seems as the reason not to do it, although things are still different than they were in 2000, as far as I can tell. But do you agree that now, maybe there's a different piece of the puzzle that needs to be considered for someone thinking about joining now compared to when we joined?
I think that prior to 9/11, you were correct. Everything seemed, there was no imminent threat from a specific country or group. And after 9/11, from 2001 up to 2017, it's a crapshoot. It seems like anything could pop up at any moment. So it's definitely a different landscape now compared to before 9/11. It's from basic training AIT. When I went home for like 14 weeks. What was that called? Hometown recruiting. Mm-hmm. And then after that, that's when I drove my car that my parents gave me. Drove it from Illinois all the way to Virginia. I was stationed at Fort Myer, Virginia, which was about 2 or 3 miles down the road from the Pentagon. So I can remember very clearly that going on patrol, we would have to go out one gate, which is by the Iwo Jima Memorial, head on Route 110, and that brought you by the Pentagon. And to actually see the Pentagon up close and actually see the damage that was there, it's one thing to see it on TV and to hear about it, but it's another thing to actually drive by it and see the damage that was actually done to the building. I can remember that very clearly from my time at Fort Myer.
Yeah, we graduated AIT, I think November 2nd, and so if you were home for 14 weeks, that would be like, what, March?
Oh, no, it was 14 days.
Oh, 14 days.
Yeah.
That sounds more right. I thought when you said 14 weeks, it seemed way too long. But, well then, let's start talking about your time as active duty in Fort Myer. I've already said I never liked being in the military, but you re-enlisted when your time was up, right?
No. I did my 5 years and then I was finished.
Oh. Well then what do you think your 5 years in the Army gave you as far as preparation for life after?
I know that going through the Army prepared me for what I'm doing now. I wouldn't go back in time and not join the military.
What are you doing now?
Right now, at the moment, I'm a customs inspector at Ramstein Air Base. And when I was in the Army, I had a 5-year enlistment. My first duty station was Fort Myer, Virginia. I was there until March of 2004, and then I had gotten orders to Germany. And once I got to Germany, I was with the 560th MP Company, which was MP Customs. The whole company was only Customs, and that's the only MP Customs in Europe. I think they might have some MP Customs in Korea I might have heard of. But when I got there in March of 2004, I got stationed at Ramstein Air Base doing the same thing that I'm doing now. I was there till May of 2006, and then I ETS'd, which means I exited the military, and I wanted to go into school. I moved back to Illinois. I had gotten married while I was in Germany and moved back to Illinois to have nothing to do with the Army or the government.
All right. I think in closing, I'll just ask you to make your commercial, if you so choose. You can make it a commercial in favor of or in opposition to a 17-year-old. Say it's a 17-year-old with very little prospect of college or maybe no desire to go to college and thinking, what am I going to do with myself after high school? What would you tell that 17-year-old about a career in the military?
I would say that you need to do your research because there's a big difference between the Army, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, and the Navy. And doing that research, you need to find out, you need to talk to people that are actually in the military and then ask them how it really is, because you can only go so far with the recruiter. The recruiter is trying to sign you up. They don't call it a quota, they call it by another name, but there are requirements that they need to get every month. And when they don't meet those requirements, then it looks bad on them. And when you're in the military, you get a annual appraisal for NCOs called a NCOER, and then officers OER. So they're under pressure to get people in. And I know from personal experience doing the hometown recruiting that I know that things were fabricated or exaggerated. For example, I went to a high school, and the recruiter I was with told a person that was interested in the Army, and they were also, I don't remember what instrument they played, but they were in the band at the high school, and the recruiter told them, oh yeah, there's you can do the Army band. They're at this location and this location and that location. And then after we left and got in the car, he admitted to me that that wasn't true. So it's very important that you do your research, and there's a big, like I said, big difference between Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, and the Navy. I work on an Air Force base at the moment, and there's this stigma that, oh, join the Air Force, life is better. And from what I understand from the airmen that I speak with, that life is definitely a lot better. They get better accommodations. They get treated differently. They treat each other differently. It's more like a business compared to like the Army and the Marine Corps. I would say the Army and the Marine Corps they're very closely related when it comes to discipline and the mentality. And I think the Navy is right behind them with the discipline as well. But if you want to join the military and you don't want to be like a super soldier, you might want to look into the Air Force. And maybe if I could do things over again, the Air Force might have been a different option. But I don't regret joining the Army and being a MP, being at Fort Myer, Virginia, and doing the MP Customs in Germany. It was a good time, but it wasn't a good enough time for me to re-enlist and go further. But I'm very happy with what I did do. Is I got out and then I joined the government as a civilian employee for the Department of the Army, and I'm furthering my career that way. So at the moment I have 15 years invested with being in the Army and being a government employee, and it definitely helped me being in the military to be where I'm at now.
Well, lucky for you, you were able to get out when you wanted to get out, because there was a time there, I think between 2002 and maybe 2003 and even 4 perhaps, when they instituted this stop-loss program and they wouldn't let people get out. Even when their contract ran out, they kept them around and kind of put you in a situation where you would feel the pressure to re-enlist, because at least if you do that, you can get a signing bonus and maybe get your choice of next station or some kind of perk. Because either way, you're still going to be there, so why not get a bonus? So congrats to you for being able to get out when you wanted to and when you could. And then your story about the lies to the musician are way too personal for me, because that same thing happened to me. My recruiter told me I could play baseball, and then in basic training, come to find out the only baseball teams left in the world in the Army are in Germany and Hawaii. And so I wasn't going to be in either one of those places, so that didn't help me very much. That was the whole reason I joined. So it's part of the reason I felt so bad about being there, I think. But do you have any sign-off message for anyone? I don't know if that last bit would count as your sign-off message, but anything you want to say?
Like I said, just do the research, and if it's something you want to do, maybe not do a 5-year enlistment. 5-year enlistment, maybe they have something shorter. Then you can kind of dip your toe in the water and see. But it definitely restructures the way you do things when it comes to discipline and learning that how the world works when it comes to the military, and you can bring or you can take those things that you learn there and use them in the civilian world.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jesse. This, I hope, will be informative and instrumental for some young folks considering this kind of career. And I just want to thank you for your contributions because I know I couldn't have said nearly anything about what you've said. Like I said, I really just forget so much about that period of my life. I'm not sure if my brain has done that on purpose or what's the deal. But again, thanks for doing this, and I think it was a pretty good episode.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. All right.